300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. I have to ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game. I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad you could join me on this Monday morning. I have a lot to talk about, including some potential beef in the NBA with Paolo, Banchero, and Dejounte Murray. Some interesting stuff. I'm going to touch on that in just a moment. But I have to start in the NFL. We're getting close to the end of training camp and the start of the NFL season. In fact, the first official preseason game or slate of games is taking place this weekend. We had the Hall of Fame game a couple weekends ago, but this is the first actual full schedule where every team is playing in the preseason. That's coming up this weekend. So there are a lot of storylines entering not only into this regular season, but towards the conclusion of training camp, and specifically with the San Francisco 49ers. All the attention's been on Jimmy Garoppolo. What are the 49ers going to do with Jimmy Garoppolo? And so far, the public statement that the 49ers have continued to repeat and continue to make is there are no rush to trade him. And they haven't found a trade partner as of right now, but are willing to wait all the way till August 30th, which is the final day to make roster cuts, before they're either going to cut him or release him or make some type of move. They're willing to wait all the way till that time. That's what Kyle Shanahan has iterated. That's what John Lynch, the general manager, has said. The 49ers are not trying to act in a rushed way. They're not trying to make any rash decisions. And specifically, something that Kyle Shanahan said was right now they're at the point where Jimmy G is simply rehabbing until he's healthy enough to find another destination. So a trade or a cut and release, one of those two options seems inevitable, seems to be in the works, because he's been staying away from practices, from meetings. The team has allowed him to work out separately with the understanding that they've completely handed their keys to the franchise to Trey Lance, the guy that they drafted with the number 3 overall pick in last year's 2021 NFL draft. They have come out and said, Trey Lance is our leader moving forward. He's the guy moving forward. And so the question is, if you're the San Francisco 49ers, now again, they still have time to make one of these decisions, but are you willing to bring the 30-year-old Eastern Illinois product back into the roster as a backup in the event you can't find a trading partner, or you're unwilling to just release him on roster cut day? Is that a strategy that you're willing to employ? And for me, when I look at those options, that doesn't seem like a viable option to me. To me, if you're the San Francisco 49ers, there is no way at this point in not only the offseason, but in the development and in the progression of Trey Lance, that you can just simply decide, let's bring back Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't think that is a rational line of thinking, because so far, by all accounts, by all reports out of 49ers camp, the players absolutely have raved about Trey Lance. They've talked about his leadership. They've talked about his athleticism, his playmaking ability, the impact that he's had. And I think that all of those great characteristics, the messages that he's trying to send, his leadership, how vocal he is, I think all of that, the impact that he has, all of that gets reduced and could completely dissipate and disintegrate if you bring back Jimmy Garoppolo onto this roster, no matter what type of role it is. Because even if you say, well, let's bring him back as a backup, well, all eyes are going to be on Trey Lance, almost wishing for him to fail, because the second that he struggles in a game, in a practice, all eyes are going to be turned to Jimmy Garoppolo and Kyle Shanahan, basically claiming reinsert Jimmy back into the starting lineup to salvage and save the day. So if you want Trey Lance to be able to continue to operate more freely, to play with a sense of confidence, knowing that there's no one competing directly behind him, that he can assume this role, if you allow Jimmy Garoppolo to return to the lineup, to the roster, with the possibility of taking over as the starting quarterback in the event that he doesn't perform, I think that's a recipe for disaster. I think that will cause a fracture and a fissure of some kind in the locker room. I just don't think. I think that the players are going to be a little bit torn, a little bit divided over who they should follow. We know that Jimmy Garoppolo is well liked. He's well liked within that San Francisco 49ers locker room. And how long would it be before the players ultimately return to his side and support Jimmy Garoppolo and kind of cast aside Trey Lance and all the gains that he's made this offseason in training camp? So that's I think the problem, because if you're John Lynch, and listen, John Lynch is an excellent GM. He doesn't make rash decisions. He doesn't make impulsive decisions. But I don't think that at this point you can continue to simply hold on to Jimmy Garoppolo, which is why I think their most viable option, the best option for them right now, is to try to execute a trade. Now, I know they've been trying to execute a trade for several months, but perhaps their asking price has been a little bit too unrealistic. Perhaps it's been a little bit too unrealistic. Perhaps they're asking for too much. We saw the type of compensation that the Browns were able to get for trading Baker Mayfield to the Carolina Panthers, but part of that trade was they had to eat about 55% of his $19 million fully guaranteed. And the Browns have to pay him about $10.5 million or so. Perhaps the 49ers need to execute something like that, where it's a partial buyout on their end, but they also get to trade him. Because if they're not able to trade him, and you think it's going to be potential thorn in the side of Trey Lance if you bring back Jimmy Garoppolo at the start of camp, at the start of the regular season, after roster cuts, well, then you're just either going to lose him for no compensation whatsoever, because you're going to have to just flat out cut him, or you might cause this divide in the locker room. And I don't think that's an option that they're willing to entertain. And so I think that the realistic trading partners, again, when you look at the landscape in the NFL, the only team that appears on the surface to be in need of a starting quarterback is the Seattle Seahawks. Right now, they're holding a quarterback battle between Geno Smith and Drew Lock. Now, we saw what types of lengths Stephen Ross was willing to go to tank and to try to acquire a high draft pick, a potential franchise quarterback. So if I was the Seattle Seahawks, I don't think I'd be interested in trading for Jimmy Garoppolo and perhaps jeopardizing my chances at landing a top NFL draft pick, because Right now, they are one of the worst teams, if not the worst team on paper in the NFL, and they can be in contention for the Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Caleb Williams sweepstakes. And I don't think they want to improve their roster and their record to a mediocre or below average team by trading for Jimmy Garoppolo and losing out on one of those franchise caliber quarterbacks. So I don't know if the Seahawks are the best option. I think that that John Lynch should pick up the phone and should call the Atlanta Falcons. I know that they traded for Marcus Mariota and they've got Desmond Ridder. They drafted him. Listen, I like Marcus Mariota. He's an Oregon Pac-12 guy. I think that he was given a couple opportunities in Tennessee and with the Raiders. I'm not sure if he's proven that he's truly a franchise quarterback. I would love to see him succeed. I don't know if I'm sold. Jimmy Garoppolo, I think, is a better option than Marcus Mariota. I think you call the Pittsburgh Steelers. Right now, Mitch Trubisky has been struggling, and I think that deep down the Steelers would be perfectly content allowing Kenny Pickett to redshirt an additional season and sit behind a more established quarterback. And the roster is pretty good, where I think Jimmy Garoppolo would be able to thrive with the Pittsburgh Steelers and Mike Tomlin. So I think that's an option. I think the Texans are a potential option. I don't know how convinced the Texans are with Davis Mills, and if they're not, do they really want to improve their team and finish with a better record, or do they want to stay worse and give themselves a higher draft pick? That's an option. That's something to think about. So the only other team that's interesting and intriguing is the Cleveland Browns. And I think that what the Browns ultimately do hinges entirely on what the punishment is from the NFL that they hand down and levy against Deshaun Watson. What's the sentence for Deshaun Watson? If he's going to be suspended for the entire season, well, I think with the roster that they have, they'd be better off with Jimmy Garoppolo in the starting lineup than with Jacoby Brissett. But if the sentence is either 6 games or something between 6 and 12, well, maybe you just say, you know what, we don't want to trade any more assets to acquire Jimmy Garoppolo. We'll just wait till Deshaun Watson returns and Jacoby Brissett can hold down the fort in the meantime. Because the truth is, outside of serving as a backup, those are the only possible trades. Those are the only teams that I think he could realistically be traded to. So, again, I think if the 49ers hold on to him beyond the roster cut date, I think it will cause a divide in the locker room. I don't think that's good long-term for Trey Lance and his confidence moving forward. And again, the 30th is the final day to make roster cuts, and I just have a hard time believing the 49ers are willing to just release him and cut him and not get any compensation for him. But then again, if they leave him on the roster, on the 53-man roster after the 30th, they owe him $27 million fully guaranteed. So I expect them to try to execute a trade because I don't think they'd want to see him just walk away for nothing. I wouldn't want to do that if I was the GM of the 49ers. So I want to transition to the Cleveland Browns. I just mentioned them as a potential interesting wild card trade destination for Jimmy Garoppolo. But when you look at their actual roster right now, the only news that's come out of their camp outside of the Deshaun Watson news, of course, has been with Kareem Hunt, their number 2 running back, making that dynamic backfield with Nick Chubb. And so far, Kareem Hunt has come out and said yesterday that he wants a new contract extension or he wants to be traded because he just missed his second straight day of practice. He skipped out on drills, on team drills. And this is a guy in Kareem Hunt who obviously has had an interesting start to his NFL career, to say the least. He's 27, just turned 27 on Saturday, just completed his 5th season in the NFL. And here's what we know about Kareem Hunt. Setting aside his talent, we know what his off-the-field past transgressions were. He was cut by the Kansas City Chiefs after assaulting a woman in a hotel. He was cut by the Chiefs, missed the second half of the 2018 season. The Browns sign him, has to miss the first 8 games of the 2019 season. The Browns give him another chance. They give him a second chance. They sign him on the cheap because he was willing to simply play for nothing for a 1-year contract. Then they extended him 2 more years for the 2020 and 2021, or in 2020. After 2020, they extended him. Of course, he had a tremendous season, over 1,100 rushing yards, 11 touchdowns that season. 2021, the start of the year, they extended him for 2 more seasons, for last year and this upcoming season. 2 years, $12 million. He had a shortened injury 2021 campaign because of calf and ankle injuries and ailments. So he really wasn't as productive. He wasn't that healthy last season. Only amassed 560 total yards and 5 touchdowns in 8 games played. So that's the past of Kareem Hunt. But what we know about the Cleveland Browns is they've obviously had a checkered past, present, and future as far as guys that they've signed, guys with past transgressions off the field, questionable signings. And of course, they were perhaps the only team that was willing to take a chance on Kareem Hunt so soon after he was released by the Kansas City Chiefs. And again, Kareem Hunt is an extremely talented running back. There was a reason why the Chiefs took him. He was extremely productive his rookie year, and then 11 games into his second season, that's when he shoved and kicked a woman out of Cleveland, ironically enough, a Cleveland hotel. So what the people you sign, the players you sign, can sometimes be a direct reflection of your organization, the message you're trying to send. And what the Cleveland Browns have shown, especially recently, is when you are an incompetent franchise, when you are a losing franchise, you're willing to do whatever it takes to win, because winning comes at a premium. When you are starving, when you're salivating for wins and for a winning culture, you're willing to sign guys with checkered pasts. And obviously they just signed Deshaun Watson, fully guaranteed, $230 million, fully guaranteed, in a desperate move in search of wins. So as far as morally or ethically where the Browns stand, that doesn't matter to them. So signing him, it's not a matter at this point of, well, is he a good character fit? The question is whether they want to pay him and pay him more. And I think that their number one priority at the running back position is and will continue to be Nick Chubb, as it should, because Nick Chubb is their number one running back option. But I do think that Kareem Hunt was instrumental in forming that dynamic backfield. I think that he provides a little bit more versatility and a unique element to this team and to that running back position that Nick Chubb doesn't necessarily provide, because Kareem Hunt is a really unique running back. He's almost akin to Alvin Kamara. He's got great hands, so he can collect huge yards after the catch. You can line him up in the slot or the backfield. He's not quite as physical and as much of a bruiser type of traditional running back as Nick Chubb is. He's certainly strong, Kareem Hunt, but he's not built the same way that Nick Chubb is. And so he's kind of a little slithery. He finds little nicks and crannies and able to fit himself and maneuver, juke past guys. He's a really clever running back, and he can do a lot of different things and provide a lot of versatility that Nick Chubb can't exactly provide or doesn't provide nearly as much of. So I do think that he's valuable. And I think that on pretty much every other NFL team, he would be a starting running back. It just so happens that with the Browns, they already have an established number one guy, so he's been relegated to the number two position. But there's no denying that he helped the Browns return to the playoffs for the first time since 2002 in the 2020 season. He certainly helped lead them to their first victory in the postseason since 1994. So he does have value, and I do think that the Cleveland Browns should try to re-sign him. I think that again, the additional benefits of having him out there, he can spell Nick Chubb, allows Nick Chubb to remain a little bit fresher, perhaps a little healthier throughout the duration of the season. I think that that's important, especially when they have had such a run-heavy offense in recent years. Now, perhaps part of that was because of Baker Mayfield, and if you have Deshaun Watson as the starting quarterback, he can overcome perhaps a lack of depth at the running back position or even other deficiencies throughout the football team. But in the meantime, the run game has been so vital to the Browns' offense that I do think it's important to be able to give Nick Chubb a legitimate reprieve. And when you have a guy in Kareem Hunt who's reliable, he's productive at that number two position, I do think it's extremely worthwhile to keep him. Just like I think for the Dallas Cowboys, it's important to keep and pay Tony Pollard because Zeke hasn't had the same tread on his legs ever since the last couple of years. But I think the conundrum that the Browns are in and that they face right now is their roster is way too talented to simply not sign some of the good players that they have on their roster. That's the problem. Their roster is too good and too talented to simply waste away a season. And I don't think that regardless of whatever sentence the NFL comes down on, whatever ultimately happens after the gavel is hit, and whatever is said to Deshaun Watson, whatever the punishment is, I don't think they're just simply going to try to accept that and be willing to be bad because their team is too good. Their team is simply too good for that. So I don't think they should trade him, which they've come out and said they don't want to do. I think they should try to find some type of agreement and extend him if they can. That's what I believe. So I want to transition now to the NBA. Of course, we're in the middle of the NBA offseason. So there hasn't been a ton of news, but I do think it's been interesting, all these pro-am showcases scattered throughout the U.S. We're seeing all these NBA players playing and participating, and obviously NBA players have always played in these pro-am summer leagues and summer showcases, whether it's in their hometowns, whether it's simply in other states that they're traveling to, and there's a great reason behind it. Obviously, it allows you to stay in good basketball shape. It allows those players to hone different skill sets, work on different aspects of the game, stay in basketball shape, and play high-intensity basketball over the summer. And sometimes that's hard to come by. When you're just practicing on your own, you don't get good run-ins. And these are legitimate professional basketball players. They don't play in the NBA necessarily, but they could play overseas or abroad, or they're elite amateurs. So there's still actual defenders you're getting to work on and play against in a high competitive situation. And obviously, it's become extremely popular, it seems, over the last several years that basketball players, NBA players have been participating in these summer leagues. Of course, in Los Angeles, the well-known one is the Drew League. We just saw LeBron and DeMar DeRozan participate and play in the Drew League. There have been numerous other guys over their careers that have stopped by the Drew League and various other showcases to make appearances and to play. But it seems like this summer in particular, NBA players are playing in these showcases with more regularity. There seems to be an abnormally high number of NBA guys playing in the showcases this particular summer. Hard to understand fully why that is, but that seems to be the case, especially with certain teams, the Atlanta Hawks in particular, with Trae Young and Dejounte Murray and John Collins. They've been playing a lot, but especially Dejounte Murray. He's been playing a ton. And so Paolo Banchero, who's also been playing in a lot of these Pro-Am showcases, which makes sense. He's the number one pick. He's trying to stay sharp and ready for the start of the NBA season. So he and Dejounte Murray played in the same Pro-Am Summer League game yesterday, or at least over the weekend. And they got into it on the court. It ultimately transferred over to online, and both of them were taking jabs at each other on social media. And what happened was, the context was Dejounte Murray schooled Paolo Banchero. He ball faked him, got him to spin around, threw it off the backboard to himself and dunked it home, stared at Banchero, and viciously threw the ball at his feet before talking smack and walking away. So Paolo responded on social media, basically saying, LOL, you started unfollowing me on Instagram and all these social media platforms. This must be personal for you. And he said, quote, that's fine. Just make sure you guard up next time and stop sending doubles, fam. So Dejounte Murray, of course, responds. We're in the age where you have to respond to every single comment about you. And he basically said to him that, hey, Paolo, you tried flexing your number one status on me when I've been rooting for you ever since you were a kid and you were rebounding for me after my shots. So clearly they've had a little bit of a history. Then Dejounte Murray goes on to say that the reason that I was upset with you is that you changed. You changed from a humble kid, from who you were when you were young. You made it and changed, and I lost all respect. He said, stay humble. This life you in now is real and ain't no joke, being in the NBA. So I still want to see you win because that's who I am. So that's the context, right? Dejounte Murray basically saying, hey, kid, stay humble. You're in the NBA now. You're playing against grown-ups, against good players that aren't going to take that type of status as the number one pick on me. Now, I have close sources within the Orlando Magic organization, and I've spoken to them, and they've spoken glowingly about Paolo Banchero, about his character, about his demeanor. Obviously, his talent is through the roof, but what type of guy he is in the locker room and who he stands for. So do I think that there's really any beef going on between these two? No, I don't. All this is two competitive guys going up against one another in a competitive basketball setting. That's all that this is. And every guy that plays in the NBA is extremely, extremely competitive. You don't make it into the NBA without perhaps fabricating some kind of motivation, playing with some kind of chip on your shoulder. To play in the NBA, all these guys have inflated egos. All of them are arrogant. All of them are conceited to some degree. All of them think extremely highly of themselves, because that's a basic fundamental trait you have to possess to be a professional basketball player and to be a professional athlete in general. So this is just a little chippiness from two guys that are competitive. They're going to be facing one another. They're in the same division, the Hawks and the Orlando Magic. So they're going to be seeing each other all the time. Perhaps they did have some connection when they were younger. However, I do think that it does highlight one thing. And I think that we are seeing one trend in the NBA across every generation that I think Dejounte Murray is hitting on. And that's a lack of respect for the elders, a lack of respect for the guys that have come before them. You talk to any NBA player, and the one thing that they care a lot about, not going to say the most about because perhaps that's winning, but what they care the most about is being respected. What they care the most about is feeling like if you've accomplished something in this league, that you should give me the respect that I deserve. And the trend is that younger players that are coming up now in the NBA don't apparently respect the guys that have come before them. That's why you see guys like Jerry West clapping back at JJ Redick, who made those comments about Jerry West playing against plumbers, basically highlighting the lack of athletes in the 60s as there are when he played and as there are now. And how there are more athletes today than there were back then. And so Dejounte Murray, he's still part of the newer generation of NBA players. But even he's been in the league for 5 years. And perhaps this is as simple as, hey, Paolo, just show me a little bit of respect. I know you're the number one pick. I've accomplished things in this league that you can only dream of. I've been an all-star already. Just signed a huge contract. Show me a little bit of respect. And perhaps that's all that this is. So I don't think that this is legitimate beef. They'll hash it out. They'll be fine. But it is entertaining to say the least. But I do think that there is something that rings true underneath and is a point that these NBA players have tried to underscore over the last several years, which is, hey, show a little bit of respect to the guys that have come before you, that have proven, that have done things in the league. And I think that's the main point that he's making, but they'll quash all this beef. There's nothing going on. Jonathan Rifkin, stay humble, Jonah. Sources. Appreciate you tuning in. And so with that, I'm going to transition to my favorite topic every single show, my Malkin's Moments. I have some great Malkin's Moments for you on this Monday morning. So I want to start with the PGA Tour. Joo Young Kim, he wins the Wyndham Championship, but this is why this is special. So he finished 20 shots under par and became the first player born in the 2000s to win on the PGA Tour. He's 20 years old. He was born on June 1st, 2002. So he literally just turned 20 a couple months ago. And the South Korean collected his first PGA Tour win. But with this win in particular, he's already advanced to the FedEx playoffs, which, of course, is one of the biggest tournaments that every PGA golfer hopes to participate in. And listen, I know that there are a lot of major golfers no longer on the PGA Tour because they've defected to the Live Golf Tour. But and so you can say that maybe the competition isn't quite as stiff as it has been in the past, or that it normally would be in a tournament like this. But I don't really care. It's still impressive, and I want to give this kid his flowers. And earlier in the day, mind you, he actually tied for the second lowest front nine hole score in PGA Tour history at Wyndham Championship. So when you're in the realm and in the status of, hey, you've broken an historical mark or you've tied for an historical mark, I don't really care who you're playing against because you're breaking, you're setting new marks, you're breaking history. So that's impressive in and of itself. Speaking of setting records and breaking history, Jacob deGrom of the New York Mets sets an MLB strikeouts record. He has collected the most strikeouts through 200 starts in MLB history. He seems to be the sleeping giant that everyone forgets about in the MLB and in baseball because the Mets for the longest time have just been garbage. But now that they're really good, people are remembering Jacob deGrom is actually a beast and has been in the conversation with Clayton Kershaw as a top 2, top 3 pitcher of this decade. That's the type of guy we're talking about here. Jacob deGrom has been incredible. He just collected his 1,518th strikeout yesterday in the Mets' 5-2 victory over the Atlanta Braves. He struck out Colby Swanson. Again, it was just his second start of the year because he was dealing with a stress fracture in his right shoulder at the start of the MLB season, literally on April 7th. So right before the season was about to commence, he suffers this injury, just worked his way back into the starting lineup. And this is a Mets team that has not only been able to stabilize the ship without Jacob deGrom, they're sailing pretty smoothly right now. They're 70-39. They've got the second best record in the National League, just behind the Dodgers. If they were in the American League, they'd be tied with the Yankees for the best overall record. So they're tied for the second best record in baseball right now. And the Mets are a legitimate contender. And when he is rolling, and now that he's back and he's healthy, this is a legitimate contender to win the World Series. And yes, even for my Dodgers, they are a competitor. They are a legitimate threat because Max Scherzer is pitching extremely well. And now you add Jacob deGrom, two legitimate aces. That could potentially be 2 wins on the mound for the Mets in the postseason. That's extremely, extremely important. So major shout out to him. His biggest Achilles heel has been health. Last 3 years, he's been battling health and injuries. So hopefully he can stay healthy because when he's right, he's got vicious command and vicious stuff. And finally, my final Malkin's moment, I want to give a shout out to Candace Parker of the Chicago Sky. She became just the 5th WNBA player to record at least 600 blocks in her career. And yes, this is for a Chicago Sky team who is the reigning WNBA champion. They've got the best record in the WNBA again this year. They're 25-8. She had 18 points and 2 blocks in the Sky's win over the Connecticut Sun last night. But again, Candace Parker is arguably one of the top 10 greatest WNBA players of all time. I think you can make an argument for her. So the fact that she's able to accomplish all these records and these highlights in her hometown of Chicago too, that's what made her returning back to the Chicago Sky such a heartwarming story, is the fact that she's from Chicago and she continues to just charter new paths and continue to lead. That's the biggest characteristic that I think we can say about her. She's been a winner everywhere she's been, and she's just a great leader. She wins every single place she plays. So congratulations and shout out to her. That's all the time that I got for today. Thank you so much for joining me right here on Morning Joe every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe, J-O with Jonah Malkin on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at Jonah_Malkin or at Morning_Joe_ JMalkin97 on Instagram and Jonah Malkin on TikTok. Thanks so much. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.